Good morning.
Good morning, everybody on Zoom as well. Welcome to our Wednesday class, coming to you from Tybee Island Pier. I was given an invocation and left early so I could teach this class. So excited though to be out here, and my hotspot's working well. We're recording this for posterity and for YouTube, and we're going to record it onto the cloud. That's welcome to all the people here on Zoom, and welcome to everybody on YouTube. So welcome, we have Larry here, and we have Flossie and Ron and Arlene and Michael today on Zoom, and others on YouTube. And we're going to talk a little bit about favorite Jewish places to visit in the United States, although I think Canada would be fine as well. But don't tell Canada we consider it part of the United States, because I have friends who may hate that more than anything else. So we had a great time last time. If we want to do anything about foreign countries as well, because last time we had a great time talking about a variety of places, and hopefully people brought some places that they like to talk about. So we're going to bring it to you guys. Anybody want to start talking about a place in the United States that you had a really incredible Jewish visit for whatever reason?
Rabbi, one of the places that we went to was the Turo Synagogue.
Oh, you did go to Turo. What did you think about that? Why don't you explain what
It
Turo
was
is?
very wonderful.
Wonderful.
In fact, we learned that the end of the Underground Railroad ended there underneath the pulpit. They showed us how the door opens, and there was the end of the Underground Railroad.
Very interesting.
Wow.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that as well. And why don't you tell everybody what Turo is so they know?
Turo Synagogue is the second oldest synagogue in the United States. 1698 it opened. Of course, the main one in New York City opened in 1694. And the Turo Synagogue is number two. And really worthwhile going there and taking a tour.
And what kind of building is it like exactly?
It was not Gothic. It was
No.
looked more like a modernish type of building.
Really? That's interesting, because it's the oldest synagogue building still in existence.
Yeah, it didn't have the old look though.
Oh, really? So they must have modernized it a bit.
Yeah.
Washington.
Yeah, I think George Washington did go there. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, it is the second oldest, and it's tied with every other synagogue in the world for the second best.
Yeah, we also visited a synagogue in Miami Beach, Florida, around First Street, and it has the Sephardic.
The windows.
Yeah, it's a Spanish speaking, and Maya Lansky donated all of the stained glass windows.
Wow.
And that was really very interesting. In fact,
They say, why would Meyer Lansky donate the windows to a Sephardic synagogue? That's pretty interesting, because I don't think, was he Sephardic?
well, he lived in Miami,
Yeah.
Miami Beach, and they once Golda Meir refused to let him live in Israel. So perhaps he donated to this synagogue to make himself feel good.
And I have to tell you something also. When I was with one time in Miami Beach with my grandfather, we passed by this building, and my grandfather said to me, Arlene, Meyer lived there. I said, Grandpa, who's Meyer? He said, Meyer Lansky, of course. So they all knew Meyer Lansky in those days.
It's one of the only times in history where Israel refused
That's
a
right.
person who could prove he was Jewish to come into the country. I think it was by special request by the American government. But so the one in Turo, as you mentioned, is very famous because it's a historic congregation, but Washington spoke there. And that is why the letter from Washington to the Turo congregation, although not the first one, is the most famous one, because he spoke there when he was promoting the Bill of Rights. So I would love to go to Truro. I think many people have. It's do they have services there like every Friday and Saturday?
I don't know.
No, I don't recall. We can look it up
Yeah,
though.
I don't know.
Well, 15 years ago, I think they did. That's when I was there.
Oh,
I think
okay.
They did. Yeah.
And we also know that the synagogue itself was defunct after the port went, not belly up, but ceased to be an important port, Newport. And so was under the control for like 100 years of the New York synagogue, Shereth Israel.
Right. Right.
And we know this because there was that issue for some, the Rimonim. The Truro wanted to sell these Rimonim, these Torah crowns,
Yes.
for like $5 million. And New York Shereth Israel said, no, we own them because we owned you guys for 100 years. And it was a big debate that made the paper. So I'd love to go to Truro one day in Rhode Island. I would love to go to Miami, see some synagogues there.
We were also at Sheriff Israel.
Yes,
Oh, were you?
On 71st Street in Central Park West.
a number of times we were there.
Were you there? Because that's a Sephardic synagogue still too, isn't it?
The what?
I think that's still Sephardic synagogue, isn't it? Or is it not anymore?
I'm not sure.
I don't know what it was, but
Yeah.
back then when we were there, it was.
Okay. And that's the oldest one, but their building is much more recent, I think.
Well, yeah, I think that's their, that's not the original building.
No.
No.
Very cool. Well, you've just been, so you've basically been to the three oldest synagogues in America. Have you been to the fourth, fifth, and sixth?
The fourth one in Philadelphia? I don't think so.
And the fifth one in Charleston, or the sixth one?
Yeah.
Oh, the one in Charleston we were
Yeah,
at,
the
yeah.
one in Charleston many times over the years, yeah.
About the sixth one. Have you ever been
Sixth
to the
one's
sixth
Richmond.
one?
Richmond. I have not. I've only been to ours and KKBE in Charleston. Have you been to the one in Richmond?
No,
I'm not, no.
I think so.
I didn't realize Richmond was the sixth. I thought ours possibly was the sixth,
We're the third.
the third.
Well,
Okay.
There was 5 congregations at the time of the beginning of the revolution. After the revolution ended, Richmond was founded before Washington was inaugurated or before he was elected. So it's considered a continental congregation as well.
yeah, the way it goes is that it's Sheriff Israel, the Truro, Mikveh Israel, Charleston, and then Philadelphia. They're the 5 oldest.
Yeah, what year was Richmond established? Do you know, Rabbi?
It had to be between 1783 and 1790. So it had to be established in that period.
Yeah, because Richmond became the capital just around the time of the American Revolution, when they moved out of Williamsburg, because they were concerned that the British troops were coming into the Williamsburg area.
Oh, is that
was a port. So they decided to move the government out of, move it further inland. And I thought it was, but it took quite a few years, I guess, for the synagogue there to get established. I don't know if there was a synagogue in Williamsburg at the time.
There would not have been, because we would probably have that recorded as one of the historic congregations.
I'll tell you, if you haven't been to the one in Charleston, it's worth the trip.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And they finished their very lengthy renovations. They had some peeling, especially on the roof, on the ceiling, in like March of 2020.
Perhaps we could resurrect that idea that we had last year or 2
That's a
years.
great
ago.
idea.
Remember?
Yes, absolutely.
Down to Charleston. Yeah, maybe we
I
could
think if
do that.
people feel comfortable, we'll do it right now. Why don't we think about doing that maybe in the spring?
Absolutely.
That would be
Yeah, that would be
wonderful.
nice.
Yeah, by the spring.
Yeah, we had it almost all set up when again, like everything else, all the plans were set aside. Did anybody have any other synagogues they visited or Jewish places they visited in the US they'd like to mention? There's so many.
Well, we also were at the Jewish synagogue in New Orleans.
Which one, Turo there or?
I can't think of I can't think of its name, but we were there. It was very nice. We were also at the Mikveh Israel Synagogue in Curacao.
Oh, that's one of the oldest, if not the oldest in the
Yeah.
American.
So we
Western.
were there. And then we were also at the synagogue in St. Thomas a couple of
right.
times.
With the dirt floors.
Well, yeah,
Right.
one of
That's
those
really
three is
an
the
old
oldest. I don't know which
synagogue.
one.
That's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
but there's 3 Mikveh Israels, and again, the one in Curacao, I think, is the first we were named after from them, and then Philadelphia named themselves from us. So
Right.
It's I guess it was very popular because it hasn't been popular since. I guess some because if you go find an Emmanuel, they're everywhere, but Mikveh Israel is not very well known.
We were in a few in New York. Plus, we went to what's that church?
St. Patrick's?
St. Patrick's Cathedral. So someone said to me, "You went to St. Patrick's Cathedral? How come you're Jewish?" So I said, "God is not going to send a lightning bolt down if I go in." But that's a beautiful building.
They are beautiful.
Yeah.
I have not been there, but one day I haven't spent so little time in New York. I've been there twice, really, and one was for a conference. So I've only toured New York like once for like 2 days or 3 days.
Yeah.
So I'll get there one of these days. I actually had a trip scheduled for April of 2020. So we'll hopefully get there with a friend of mine who's right down there right now, a minister who's at the ceremony for the what they're doing at Tybee right now. Anybody else have any interesting places in the Americas they visit? And I would love to get to Carousel and St. Thomas Flossie.
Well, one place, it's not strictly Jewish, but it has a part Jewish influence, the Tenement Museum.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
that's one of the few places in New York I've been.
On the Lower East Side, yeah.
And the Lower East Side, like Michael's saying, the flavor, get a pickle, walk around.
Right. Did you take any tours from the Tenement Museum? Or did you
Yes, you choose, I think, what ethnic group, and we went naturally to the Jewish, and you got a feeling. Yes,
I did that as well.
Yes, and I was going to say, Jeff and I took a tour a few years ago that was in the South, and we went to a very interesting older synagogue in Mississippi. They're not as large as ours naturally and others, but that might be an interesting trip. Yeah. Some of the little towns
that would be a great
in the South and getting to see them.
Yeah, we could also, maybe New Orleans to the new museum there as well.
That would be a nice trip.
That would be a wonderful trip.
Larry, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I've got some stuff. It'll take a few minutes if you want to share the screen. If you indulge me for a few minutes, I've got some slides that I put together of places.
Always bringing some awesome stuff.
Well, we'll see if it's awesome. I'm not sure it's awesome, but
so far you're batting 1,000, so we'll see.
Yeah, if you can let me share screen.
You got the power.
Okay, I got the share now. And let me see if I can negotiate this the way I wanted to. And I've got Jewish places in the United States. This is kind of interesting in that, hold on a second, let me get up to the top here.
Can you make a full screen, Larry?
Yeah, 1 second. Let me just negotiate the slide that I want.
You're doing what I should have done. So that's why I know I don't have to do it because I know you will.
That's about as good as I could do, Michael. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay. I don't think I could get any better.
I'll put my glasses on.
Put your glasses on. But at any rate, just coincidentally, next semester I'm doing, or this semester in Ollie, I'm doing a class on sculpture.
Oh.
And not only Jewish sculpture, but one of the things about sculpture, obviously, is there are monuments to many, many different things, historical events. And
I'm just going to interrupt you for 1 second, Larry, for no reason, but I'm sitting here on the pier at Tybee, and a guy has just walked by me with a shofar.
Wow.
He's about to play it. I think I'm kidding. He's right over there.
Wow. Okay.
So that was just the funniest thing. I'm sorry. Continue, Larry.
Well, we can listen to him. We can hear a few tequila.
I don't know if he's going to play or not, but he's just standing there holding it. Very strange.
Oh.
Very cool. All right. Sorry, Larry. I apologize.
Yeah. So one of the things that I did, the first thing that I did was I went to the Jewish Museum in New York website because I had heard that they were doing the new exhibit at the Jewish Museum. And the first thing that showed up was something that was a little strange to me because I'd never heard of this, but the meaning of Tu B'Av. And Tu B'Av is it marks the 15th of Av, which is the festival of love, apparently, on the Jewish calendar. And it was just the other day, apparently. And the Jewish Museum always has some interesting exhibits, and they have one that's going on right now that we're not able to get into New York to see. But it kind of takes place during what's called the pivotal years of New York. But it's in a marvelous building there. If you haven't been to the Jewish Museum in New York, it's a great historical museum as well as a wonderful art museum. But this kind of interested me. I don't know if the rabbi wanted to say anything about Tu B'Av because it's a holiday I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, it's not as well known, but it's kind of like some of the Sadie Hawkins dance where gals ask out guys. It was a day where you try to find your spouse. It's kind of like a toga party. I've thrown one Tu B'Av party when I was in rabbinical school, but it hasn't become as well known. Like, I don't know why, but it's kind of, in many respects, a St. Valentine's Day type thing as well. And there were traditions about how you dressed and how you went out and tried to find your spouse. The young girls would all get ready. The young guys would all get ready. So it's one of those few purely fun holidays in Judaism, kind of akin to Hanukkah.
Yeah, they have a special display of apparently ketubas, and they said that it's an auspicious day for commitment ceremonies and weddings and things that, and enhancing romantic relationships. So
and it comes right after, you've got those weeks,
right
3 weeks before Tisha B'Av, which are all about all the terrible things that happen. And so a few days later, 6 days later, you got Tu B'Av.
And there's a whole bunch of
Saturday.
There's a whole bunch of wonderful things apparently that they say happened on the 15th of Av, the second time that Moses got the commandments. I don't know how true any of these are, but, apparently they're more apocryphal maybe than they are, mythical. But there's a whole series of events that took place that they point to on the calendar that happened on that same
Right.
day.
From the Jewish perspective, in terms of Jewish tradition, they are not apocryphal. They're considered legitimate, whether they actually happened or not, but that's part of the tradition behind it.
Well, the next thing that I did was I went to the website and I looked up famous Jewish places around the United States.
Oh, nice.
And I noticed when I went to California, the first one on the list there was the Desert Holocaust Memorial in Palm Desert. Now, Palm Desert is one of the areas around Palm Springs. There's several small towns in and around Palm Springs, and they have what I consider to be one of the finest, if you can consider Holocaust Memorial finds, they have a magnificent Holocaust Memorial. And it looked kind of like this. You walk through this kind of park area, and it's got these arch-shaped entrances, which are sort of reminiscent of what you see in Auschwitz, which were the electrified gates. A lot of signs and symbols that are on, not symbols, but explanations that are on the tablet. But the main point is the statues that they have grouped around here. As part of the sculpture talk that I'm doing, one of the major sculptures in the world is what's called the Burgers of Calais, which is a Rodin sculpture, which is in France, obviously, but there are many copies in the United States. And Rodin was one of the more modern sculptures. And this one reminded me so much of it, which he takes a group of figures and he positions them in this particular sculpture in the Holocaust Museum. He positions these sculptures around a Jewish star and on the.
By the way, here's the guy playing.
No.
Sorry for interrupting you, Larry.
No problem.
And he played it well, and he played it correctly because you're supposed to play it, in preparation for Rosh Hashanah. Sorry, I'm sorry about that, Larry. I just wanted to show you guys.
Yeah. That reminds me of something which maybe I'll come back to later. I meant to talk about it last week as well. But at any rate, I just wanted to show that if you're in the Palm Springs area, which is a magnificent area to go to anyway, this Desert Holocaust Museum, I think, is really one of the most memorable. The figures that he has here of the agonizing figure of the woman holding the child with her hand up, pleading to heaven. Some of the people, the rabbi just looking like he's in prayer. Some of the people just in total disbelief, and then the sculptures that are on the wall that are embossed on the wall are just really magnificent. So a wonderful place to just sit and contemplate, what really happened during the Holocaust. The thing about sculpture, and I point this out during the talk, is that sculpture is a three-dimensional kind of experience. A lot of people are going to these immersive exhibits, the Van Gogh exhibit and things like this, where they kind of get immersed in the paintings. It's hard to get immersed in a painting, but with a sculpture, you walk among a person, you walk among the figures, they're life-sized, and you can touch them, you can feel them, and sometimes you see kids walking up to them, rubbing the noses, on sculptures and things of this nature. So, but just a marvelous experience to.
Why would you should tell people?
So if you're in the Palm Springs area, definitely worth a little trip there for a couple of hours.
If everyone's touching it.
Well, that's so big. If you reach up and touch it, you know what you're gonna touch, don't
That's
you?
interesting that out of the list you showed us, so many of them in California are Holocaust. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's
that
only
so
a
many
small fraction of them, I'm sure. The next one that I wanted to talk about was right outside here in New Jersey. New Jersey, of course, is the center of Judaism, as many people know. So outside of Liberty State Park, overlooking both Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty, is this monument that is to a soldier taking a survivor from one of the Holocaust camps. And it is a marvelous statue by a Jewish sculptor named Nathan Rappaport. The setting, I think, is absolutely magnificent. As you can see in the top picture here, you can see the skyline of New York. You can see the Verrazzano Bridge over here. Over here, if you turn another angle, you can see the Empire State Building and the Chrysler Building over here. If you turn it another angle, you could see the Statue of Liberty and you could see Ellis Island. So the setting itself is marvelous, but it's just that this is a really sensational sculpture. There are another, so it's easy to get to Liberty State Park. Liberty State Park was, kind of like the launch point for people that would come into the United States, and then they would make their way there into the ramps. The launches would take them over toward Ellis Island or toward the city of New York if they had passport already. Again, looking at some of the other places, and these are two in place that I'm not familiar with, but Georgia only had two of them. I didn't do South Carolina. They have one in Kennesaw, Georgia, and the Brennan Museum, which we talked about on occasion. Maybe it was.
Is this just about Holocaust? Because all of them are about the Holocaust.
These are only about Holocaust. Yeah.
Okay,
I mentioned monuments about the Holocaust, or Jewish monuments about Holocaust was the subject I had Googled. But I'm not too familiar with where Kennesaw, Georgia is. Atlanta, of course, we've heard of the Bremen Museum, and they do some wonderful programs from time to time. I keep getting news bulletins about them, but those are the only two that are listed here. I did want to talk also a little bit about, since people have mentioned Miami. Miami has has a Holocaust memorial that I think is magnificent. It's almost on a separate little island in Miami Beach, and it was actually donated by the many Holocaust survivors that moved to Miami after the Holocaust. They moved from Europe, but they were survivors. You walk into this sort of like a tunnel, and you can see it in the top area over here. And as you emerge from the tunnel, you see on the walls the names of many, not the 6 million total, but there are many of the people that they know that were relatives of the people that had survived and that were dedicated to this monument. So you're walking through this kind of covered archway, and you see at the end of the covered archway, you see this giant hand that is sticking up, which is kind of like in the middle of, it looks like an island in the middle of it's kind of alone, and it's sticking up as though it's either being submerged or whatever interpretation you want to make out of it. Well, as you get closer to it, what you actually see on the island, here you could see it, you're coming into view of the island itself, and you're coming into view, and these are the figures that are sticking out of the hand. And these are the people that are pleading, emerging, trying to survive with the hand, fatally just being submerged into the area there. So once again, a magnificent Holocaust memorial sculpture. Here's again surrounding the Holocaust Memorial sculpture, which is mainly this large hand over here. You see figures like this, these gaunt figures, and then there's narratives, and these are the names of Holocaust victims, which may have been submitted by their loved ones, maybe a memory live forever, and these are the names basically of the people that they dedicated it to. So two of the monuments, I think, that are really wonderful. If I could continue for a couple of minutes, the next one that I wanted to show was not far from where we are right now in Roosevelt, New Jersey. Roosevelt, New Jersey is an interesting area, and I have a little video that I want to try and see if I can negotiate here that I took when we were there.
There's a place you can click to make the video look better.
Okay.
On your computer, on your when you maybe you know where. We'll see how it goes.
Okay, let's see how it goes. Let me see if I could find the video. That's what I'm looking for first of all. Here it is. Yeah, maybe if people could mute themselves just for a minute while I if you could mute, Flossie and everybody, could you mute yourself just for a minute while I try and do this? Okay, if everybody could just for 1 second till I get it done. Let me see if I can get this. Michael, I got it almost full screen for you now. Okay, so this is a tree outside of a school building, and we happened to be there just after a storm in New Jersey here, and the tree had fallen down. But the main reason that you want to go here is that you want to see two things. One is you want to see the city itself, but also you want to see this magnificent mural that is done by an artist called Ben Shawn. And what Ben Shawn did was he painted this mural inside of a schoolhouse. This was just prior to when the school was starting. Jane and I were there. That's Jane in the blue shirt that's standing there over here. And you could see parts of the mural over here. Now, let me just go forward a little bit and see if I can show you some of the pieces of the mural. He has the Jewish immigrants that are coming, including someone who looks just like Albert Einstein, and they're coming off of the boat and they have their numbers on them and they're coming into Ellis Island. And it's almost like a combination of the history of immigration plus the history of the labor movement, especially the ILGWU and the labor union that started in for the government workers union. And you see some of the prominent figures there. And what he's leading to is that one of the other scenes is that this particular scene shows kind of a blueprint. And this Roosevelt, New Jersey was part of what was called under the Reconstruction Act. Now, things like Hoover Dam were built under it, the Conservation Corps, a lot of the artist murals that we know about and things of that nature were during the Depression. Part of what the Roosevelt administration did apparently was try and put seed money into different areas. And they were looking for proposals from different people, different organizations, generally at least one from each of the states, and there were 48 states at the time. And they put together these proposals, each of the states or each of the individual groups. And New York put together a proposal to get the garment workers out of New York City because of the slums, because of things like the tenement buildings and things of that nature, and move them into an area that could be largely agricultural, but also self-sufficient. And the whole idea was that they put together this proposal. One of the prominent members of the group, who you'll see him in a minute, I think I have his picture someplace. He had started a collective out in Utah. He had started a chicken co-op collective out in Utah, and it failed. But nonetheless, he became friendly with somebody who eventually became very influential in the Roosevelt administration. And this guy apparently then submitted this proposal, which did get funded. And they started this whole idea of building an enterprise in this area. Here, your surveyors. And the whole idea now was for these garment workers to basically come and control their own destiny by being a co-op, almost a collective, almost like a kibbutz kind of place that was in Roosevelt, New Jersey. Throughout the United States, there were 48 of these, at least 48, one in each state. Some states had more than one. There were states that were, from different religious organizations. This is the only Jewish one that came to Roosevelt, New Jersey, and several hundred garment workers moved out into the area here. And let me just see if I can get, and I just want to fast forward through it. The mural itself, you can see it's on the upper kind of staircase. There's a stair wall. You can't walk among it, but you get close to it. And it's quite a lengthy thing. It probably is several hundred feet long. Here you see Franklin Roosevelt signing the legislation for it. And let me just see if I could get some of the better pictures that I wanted to here. Welcome, it's at Roosevelt Public School. Ben Shawn, the artist, did this afterwards, after the area was changed. Here's the Ben Shawn mural, which was done in '36, which was several years after the building. And here's the building, the co-op that was established by these Jewish garment workers, so that they were being self-sufficient at the time. Some more views of the what you see. Shawn had previously done the Sacco and Vanzetti paintings, and that's what we're in Boston. These two guys that were killed, they were not Jewish. He also has in the back there, you could see a little bit of the Nazis that were taking place. This community was really established before before 30, just around the time of 1933, when Hitler came into power. Just some of the details that you could see in the painting itself. There's some tributes to Martin Luther King and other civil rights heroes. Some of the school kids had put things. There's an enormous statue here that was done by Ben Shawn's son, Franklin Roosevelt. It was dedicated by Eleanor Roosevelt, actually, after Franklin had died. Actually, it was the last dedication that she had made. She had died very soon thereafter. This is the statue by Ben Shawn's son. In the park there. Benjamin Brown was the name of the guy who did it, and the New Jersey Homesteads, that's what the whole thing was called before it was basically called Roosevelt, New Jersey. It was part of New Jersey Homesteads. And you can see here's some of the ideas for the New Jersey Homesteads Act, and these were part of the 48 different communities in the United States. Decent homes for rural folks. These were some of the objectives that each one of the states could put together. Many of them were agricultural collectives and things like this, healthy surroundings for children, modern living for families, running water, jobs for unemployed. You could read all of these things, but these were the objectives: migratory workers, to get them out of the city and to give them a better life. And this was a map that they had, which showed all of the, not all, I think it was all of the communities probably, with different symbols. Some were farming communities, and this was one of the few, the one in Roosevelt, New Jersey was one of the few industrial communities where they built this collective there. Just to make to bring the story kind of to an end, is that after, and what the government did actually, which is also very interesting, is that here it is right now. This is the sign that you come in here. You see these kind of houses? These are based on German architect Mies van der Rohe, who was kind of like a minimalist kind of an architect. And the government came in and they actually built these nondescript kind of buildings, many of which have been renovated, but a lot of them you could see that are probably in the original state there for the workers, and they rented them out for the workers at the time. So Roosevelt became a place where you can go, you can rent a house there. You basically had a very similar, everybody had the similar kind of a style. It was almost a kibbutz kind of life. And they could live in these communities, and they could work in the co-op, and they were self-managed in the co-op. And we had met the mayor of the city, and I'll just show a brief thing about him. He's kind of an interesting character. Here he is.
after that. And he went to business marketing cooperative product. He was pretty successful with that. And then in the 20s, 28, I think, he went on a trip to he was invited to go on a mission to Birobidzhan, which is the Jewish autonomous region in the southeastern corner of Russia, which still is the Jewish autonomous region.
Larry, how many states actually implemented? You showed a thing of all the states. Did all the states implement this, or just?
Yeah, I think there was at least one type of a community in each of the 48 states. It almost was like a predecessor to the, the Habitat for Humanity, which Congress had started years ago, where they started, each congressional district, which was a lot more congressional districts, would at least have one habitat for it. So this was kind of like the same idea. And this was the only Jewish one that had been approved and proposed. There were several Black communities. There were, I believe, even Mormon communities that were established. Most of them were agrarian. Most of them were to get the people out of cities and out of slum kind of environments into farms where they would become self-sufficient. So just by chance, we happened to be in the town hall there, and they said, "Oh, why don't you call the mayor, and maybe he's available. He could give you a job. He'd give you a tour." And the guy was so willing, and he came out and he met us and he gave us this quick tour, which was
wow, that's amazing.
So it was just by chance. So just luckily, but just put it on your radar. I'm sorry, did Jane want to say something?
No,
If I'm ever out that way, I'm going to go see this.
Yeah, there is a synagogue there. The main one of the other, there is a synagogue there, as Jane points out, that I took a picture of, which is now not working. Apparently, it's it's an empty kind of a building. We're not sure what it was. We tried to get into it and made a few phone calls. The synagogue was established much later, but the interesting thing about Roosevelt, New Jersey, is the whole area now is a National Historic Site. And in addition to it being a National Historic Site, which has the preservation of the Ben Shorn mural and the Roosevelt Park and what was formerly called the Atlantic Highlands there before it was Roosevelt, New Jersey, they basically attracted a great many artists. So it's known kind of like as an artist's colony. And in addition to Ben Shorn, there are these artists that Noel is joining us. I'm just going to cut her in. So there are many artists that came there maybe 10 or 15 years later, and that's how it's got the name of being one of these artist bohemian style colonies. The mayor told a really interesting story, and I'll just finish with this, is that he said that the workers, even though they were co-op workers in this factory, and you can still see the factory building there, though it's not a co-op any longer, it's owned by a private corporation. I think they manufacture pocketbooks or something. But he said that these people, apparently after they were working there, they became dissatisfied with some of the working conditions and they decided to strike. So now you have the people who are the workers who are the owners of it striking amongst themselves. And he says, I don't know what that has to say for Jewish workers or for workers in general, but it's kind of an amusing sidelight that even though they owned the place, they were striking amongst themselves. So it's interesting. So yeah, that's.
They're ironic that a place that was set up to better conditions is striking because of the conditions. Well, thank you, Larry. That was really interesting.
Yeah. I'm stopping to share.
That was, and hopefully, has anybody else been to that area? And welcome, Noel, and welcome to Eva as well. So what we're doing is sharing any places that are Jewish. Hi, Jane, welcome back. Any interesting places Jewishly in the United States you have been to? I went to Seminole, Oklahoma. I was a student rabbi there for the high holidays one year. And obviously Seminole, Oklahoma had a smaller Jewish community decades before, but when I was in there, I think there was one member of the synagogue, maybe two. But a fund had been set up for the uptake of the synagogue itself and to bring in a student rabbi every year for the high holidays. So every year for the high holidays, they'd have 20, 25 people come in for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur from around the areas, some from Oklahoma City or from Tulsa, if their family had come from there. It was interesting because I'd never been in a synagogue that only had one or two members, but was still had the building, was paying all the bills, had a Torah scroll. and wasn't, looking to close shop. They had a beautiful children's museum there, and obviously had been set up with oil money. And there was still one person whose family was in the oil business originally who was still there, and he was kind of the guy who kept everything going, and the tours and all these things. And it was really interesting. And I remember talking to a friend of mine who had the pulpit the next year, and she's from New York, a really wonderful woman. And she was like, can you imagine? She was so shocked at going to a synagogue in Seminole, Oklahoma. She came to me after she said, can you imagine living in a small town in the middle of nowhere and being Jewish? And of course I said to her, yes, I can. I'm from South Texas, which was a much bigger community, but was at the time 5 hours from a city. So it was in the middle. So it was so shocking to her from New York, lived in LA and big cities only, to see Jews in this small community. So Arlene.
Yeah, no, I was gonna just mention, has anybody else been to like Ellis Island? That's really very interesting place to go to. We were there before they had it renovated. And so when you went in, we actually went with our synagogue. You went in and you could feel the people that were there because you had all the dust and you had all the plates and everything there. And then we came back when they had the place, in other words, renovated. And it's a very interesting place to go to, Ellis Island. It really is. It's just very interesting. And another place, of course, not nowadays, but say really many years ago, Lower East Side, New York. You couldn't beat it in those days. You walked around and you just felt it. You felt the Jewishness there.
Well, that's where they had the Jewish theater.
That's right. The Jewish theater, Yiddish theater, and you had Radners, and you had all kinds of picklemen and all kinds of other things there. And now it's Asian pretty much.
Yeah, I went there because I wanted to see all this. I was going to Israel on the trip, so I went to New York a day or two early so I could tour around. I'm like, I'm going to go to Lower East Side. I'm going to see Delancey Street, Hester Street. And I get there, and the only thing Jewish is the Tenement Museum.
That's
and
right.
I saw one pickle stand, but at the time it was more than... It's like, wow, it changes. The Lower East Side was an immigrant area. So after 30 or 40 years, the immigrants, the next generation moved somewhere else. So
right.
But I saw Hester Street, I saw Delancey Street. I don't like pickles. I just wanted to see a pickle stand. And I went
what about knishes?
I do like knishes, but there were no knish stands. I just saw one pickle stand.
So you need to go to New York again because it's hard to get a good pickle outside of New York.
Even in New York, or in New York, you can't get
outside of New York.
Do they still have pickle stands in New York?
I doubt it.
I don't know if they have the push cart stands, but I know the pickle man is still there on Essex Street.
Oh,
you can get a tour. Yeah, you can get a tour of like the food in that area, and they take you through Chinatown and through some of the places. And there's a famous candy store that we went to, and there is the pickle man there, and it's very similar to what's in that movie Crossing Delancey. If you've seen that movie,
that's why I went. I remember the movie. I was like, I'm going to go see this.
The movie Crossing Delancey, of course, refers to the fact that once you cross Delancey, you're kind of in a different world. And this was world, I think Amy Irving was from an Upper East Side, Jewish family. And he was kind of like the old style Jewish family, and so once you cross Delancey, it's a different world. I did want to mention one other thing. I wanted to mention one other thing that comes of interest, again in New Jersey here. And we had shown a movie and gotten a movie about the chicken farmers and and I don't know if some of you have seen it. I think we did it for Temple Oseh Shalom. And the movie is probably still available if any of you haven't seen it, but it's a marvelous film. And Eileen Goldberg, who most of you know, grew up on a chicken farm, actually maybe 15 minutes from where we're living right now. And she kind of gave a little bit of insight into what it was like growing up in that area, you know, and being the daughter of a chicken farmer and handling the eggs in the basement and things of this nature. That most of the area around the chicken farm has been, it's only about 5 miles from our house here now, has been flooded, and it became the Matitakunk Reservoir. So they basically created this giant reservoir, you know, around the area. And there's a couple of places you drive around, you see eggs for sale and things like this. But it might be interesting one day, maybe if we asked Eileen to come back and show that movie.
Great.
I think, I'm not sure if Karen probably has the movie or
We'd
somebody
love to
has.
start. We did a movie thing a few months ago and it went really well. We'd love to do another one. And Michael, you wanted to, did you have?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the Lower East Side. Both of my parents grew up there, and I just know that over the years, and we go down there occasionally, and over the years, though, the you know, urban renewal has changed just the physical character. Never mind the demographics, but just the physical character of the Lower East Side has changed so much. I mean, the street my father grew up on no longer exists. It's part of a large apartment building, and you know, and so many of the tenements are you know, no longer there. And then, you know, as to Larry talking about crossing Delancey, you didn't have to cross Delancey, according to my parents. I mean, you go 2 blocks away, and you know, it was a different world because, you know, 2 blocks away, there may be, you know, German Jews, whereas, you know, you're a Polish Jew or, you know, or an Austrian Jew. And these were little worlds unto themselves. So it's, you know, it's really, it's not too bad. I mean, it's just the way life is, but it really has, you know, has changed. And
what became enormous was, like Michael said, there were areas in and around Delancey, Little Italy and Chinatown and those areas. And what happened, I think, after Hong Kong came back into Chinese possession, so many of the Chinese were afraid of that they came into the United States, if they were able to, and they bought up a lot of land. And what was part of Little Italy now has become literally an expansion of Chinatown. You go into that area now, and Little Italy is probably 1 or 2 blocks long now, with maybe a few restaurant Ferraras and places like that are famous. But Chinatown is taken over. You know, the whole downtown area, that Canal Street had jewelry stores up and down Canal Street, and you go into the jewelry stores now, and they're all owned by Chinese, basically, on
The way
Canal
of
Street.
things.
the idea is to have a Chinese meal, then walk across the street and get a cannoli at Ferraris. You know? That's just what you do.
So anybody else have some other places? If you haven't been to Vidalia, Georgia, by the way, there's a synagogue there. It's a conservative, used to be Orthodox.
Really?
Members, I've spoken there, although it's been a while. We have at least one member of our congregation who lives there and is a member of that. And their building is in the shape of a Star of David.
Oh my God.
So in the middle of Vidalia, Georgia, which obviously is not a famous hub for Jews, but they've had a Jewish community, as so many Georgia cities have, and they still do. And you can see this beautiful building just kind of just right in the middle of nowhere. And it's really, the congregation still has members, and they get together once in a while. I think they have services once a month. So it's still incredible to see some of these small towns. And what's even more interesting demographically is, although probably not to Vidalia, is a lot of the Jews are moving away from big cities because they can work virtually and it's less expensive. And places like Savannah are growing because people are not leaving in mass. But New York, you know, we've seen a lot of people leave, for instance, because of the expense.
Macon, Georgia has 3
Rabbi, how far is Vidalia from Savannah?
I think it's not far. It's maybe an hour and a half. You can look that up. I've been there. Yeah, you can, if you want to see the synagogue, we'll just set you up with the people who run it. I mean, or two, the members are members of our congregation, just great people.
You know, Rabbi, in Macon, Georgia, they have 3 synagogues. And we were there, and when they had the cherry blossoms, And they have more cherry trees than Washington, D.C.
Really? It's a
But
really
they-
pretty place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
reminds me a little bit of Atlanta. It's got the hills. And I'll tell this now, but they have to work a little bit on the promotion of Macon. Because I remember when we went there during one of the hurricanes. So we went there. And if you went, we wanted to see, what are we going to do in Macon? So we went onto the city website to get like the top 10 things to do in Macon. And like number 10 was go to Savannah. So the 10th best thing to do in Macon is leave. So I thought that was, so they got to work on that. But they have a wonderful children's museum there that's just incredible. We have nothing like it here by any stretch of the imagination. But there are a lot of small towns that do have these synagogues, and that's why they have the ISJL, which might be something to talk about. It's the Institute for Southern Jewish Life, which is now moved to, the headquarters is still in Mississippi, but the museum is now in New Orleans. And they go through, and any synagogues that are going defunct, they go in and get all the stuff and do the research on the history. So all these small towns where so many people's parents and grandparents or people grew up, they have a history now of the synagogue.
Does Macon have you said Macon has 3 synagogues. I know we heard the rabbi from Macon. I think she was on the same podium that you were last week. But she's Reform, I assume.
She's Reform. There is a conservative. I know they used to have an Orthodox. They must still have it. I don't think they have a rabbi. I guess it's still open though. I didn't think it was. I know Charleston, their Orthodox synagogue closed, I believe, but they have Chabad now. So it just depends on the place. It's hard to be Orthodox in smaller cities. The Orthodox synagogue in Savannah does an extra impressive job of maintaining a vibrant Orthodox lifestyle. But of course, Savannah is a booming area. It's kind of surprising that Charleston had a little trouble, because Charleston obviously is a much bigger city than Savannah.
Just down the road from us, obviously, in Sun City in Beaufort, they have a little building that's like a house. That's kind of interesting. I don't think they have a rabbi, but they have a cantor there and a layperson leading.
Really? Because we've gone there. We went there every year for about 3 or 4 years. Remember, we used to go out to the synagogue in Beaufort for a discussion when we were having it in
I don't
person.
remember the date of it, but I think it, it's not
Beautiful
revolutionary.
little synagogue. It's beautiful.
Yeah, that synagogue, Arlene's family were one of the founders of that synagogue.
Oh, really? The one in Beaufort? I forgot you
Yeah.
told me. I'm sure you told me that before and I forgot.
Yeah.
But there's so many interesting Jewish places. I remember, and I was in rabbinical school, or maybe I was in I think when I went to the first time I went to a gay synagogue. I never even heard of that. And, they have, I think a couple of them out there, one in LA, and then eventually the president of the CCR, the Reform Rabbis organization, was from one of those synagogues. So it was interesting to go to a synagogue that was a haven for people, especially, in the 70s and 80s, when people were coming out and there's all those struggles that were going along with it in those ages.
In Bluffton, we have a Chabad. It's right on 170.
Oh yeah, I know they're doing good. And we have a Chabad here as well.
Yeah.
And I think they're brothers. The rabbis are brothers, I think.
Isn't that by Skid?
Their building now is south on Whitaker.
Oh, okay.
So it's closer to Victory.
Rabbi, my family came from, my grandfather and cousins came from Belarus. And one of the people in 1905 started the synagogue in Beaufort.
Wow, that's so.
That was a cousin of my grandfather, actually.
Yeah, in fact, we had a member, Merrill Levy, who now lives in Atlanta.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
He lives in Atlanta now. So those are some, and there's so many interesting little places to find. I remember one of my favorite places is when I was driving. I was in school in California. I lived in California 5 years, and I drive back and forth from Texas every summer and all the time, many times. And so I'd stop at different places, and I stopped at Tucson, and I went to Tombstone, which is, of course,
Yes,
a famous,
Jewish cemetery.
that's right. It's not famous for the Jewish cemetery. It's famous for the cow town and the gunfight at the OK Corral, but they have a cemetery, just a Jewish cemetery there. And it speaks a lot to about the interesting difference in the way the Jews looked at the South. You know, when you had gold rushes, a lot of Jews went to the gold rush places. What was the difference? What did the Jews do? They didn't go there for the gold. They went there to sell all of the stuff to the miners, because you could sell it like 10 times the price. So they would go with all the pots and pans and food and stuff, make a fortune, and then they'd go to the next gold rush or the next, you know, town that would, in booming town, and they'd start a general store. So it was really, so I had no idea. When I went to Tombstone, I did not go there for the Jewish cemetery. I went there to see the place of the gunfight at OK Corral, and then also there. It's kind of like,
Merrill Levy's mother, her name was Bertha, and she's a cousin of Arlene's through the families.
oh, really?
Yeah.
We're all related.
They're all related. Noah wants to share. What Jewish place have you been to?
Well, Wharton, Texas. I don't know if you ever went there when you were living here, but the synagogue had a huge congregation because all the little towns around there came and belonged to Shereth Israel. And I have such good memories of the barbecue, which raised money for the synagogue, and I knew everyone from miles around. And then it burned, and because Jews had dispersed, they didn't rebuild it, but the cemetery is still there, and it is maintained, and if you have plots, you can still be buried there. And I have such wonderful memories of summers in Wharton and going to synagogue and the swimming pool, and I'm so happy that I had that experience.
That's great. And if you live in Texas and you're Jewish, especially live in Houston or big cities, you meet a lot of Jews who came from Wharton or whose families came from Wharton or Beaumont. That's another place near Houston where, you know, as Houston became a bigger and bigger city, the next generation moved there. But yeah, Wharton, I didn't even, so who do you know who maintains the cemetery? Is it an individual? Is it a synagogue? It may be a synagogue in Houston or somebody or that maintains the cemetery.
Beth Yeshua maintains the cemetery. Yeah, Beth Yeshua maintains the cemetery, so you can still have be buried there. And I loved the place, and I met so many Jews from little tiny towns around there. Wharton was pretty big in those days, and I have such wonderful memories. Well, wonderful memories.
Yeah, I went and did a funeral about 3 hours outside Houston, about an hour and a half outside San Antonio. I mean, in the middle of nowhere, and they have a little Jewish cemetery there. And you know, I remember the funeral home there in that small town. There was only one, hadn't done a funeral there in living memory, and so, but somebody who had grown up there, I don't remember who, wanted to be buried with his family, and so I went all the way down there. It was really interesting to see the Jewish cemetery. It's not upkept, but somebody still had the keys to it, I guess. And so this was great. It was very interesting. So you see a little bit of New York and a little bit of small towns, and so next week I don't have access to my office computer right here through this, so I'll send out a note about what next week's discussion is. It may be on Jewish alcohol, Jews and alcohol, maybe. If it is, I'll make sure Bubba comes on because he's very knowledgeable about that. That would be one we would want to do live and in person if we could, right? So if we can get back together at some point, maybe we'll have a repeat of that one as well.
Okay.
All right.
This was very interesting, and Larry, thank you for your very interesting presentation.
Yeah, we may be traveling back next week, so we may not be online, so.
Well, we hope you are, and if not, we look forward to seeing. Hopefully, when everybody feels comfortable, we'll start meeting monthly again up there. Maybe by Hanukkah, we can have another Hanukkah party. If I'm looking for volunteers who will host it. Oh, Eva, thank you. You and Paul, thank you for hosting again. That's a joke because her hand's not up, but the last time she hosted, it was the most incredible food I've ever had. So no pressure for you to host it, but you know, if we ever do them live, I'm bringing my own take-home boxes. You don't have to do it. You don't have to pay for the take-home boxes. Thanks, guys. It's and again, it's fun to be here at Tybee. I was, you know, it's nice to be out here. I'm going to do this more often. I can do like this class from anywhere. So you guys stay safe and a real pleasure. Thank you guys. And high holidays coming up, Shlichot coming up, and again, everything will be virtual. But if you do want to come into town for services, we are doing 2 of most of the services. So we won't be filling, we'll be limiting to about 150 people. And then we will be doing an outdoor shofar blowing and an outdoor tashlich if that makes it a little bit easier for people to want to go inside. So what we'll do is we'll have 2 of almost all the services, like the main ones, but one of those will be virtual. So you have an option to do it virtually or to go in person.
That's a good thing.
And then our block party, if anybody's interested in coming down, we block off the street and we'll have a block party this Sunday at noon with the kids and adults. We'll have an ice cream truck. We're gonna have mac and cheese because and so it should be fun. And then lastly, tonight at 8 o'clock, they're doing the Orthodox Synagogue invited the conservative and Reform synagogues to join them for a kosher thing at bar food. So can hang out with different people from different, synagogues. So you guys have a good one. It's such a pleasure seeing you guys. It really is awesome. Noel, it's great to see you. And thanks for everybody for joining us on our Wednesday class. That is, what do we call? I think the name is going to be, what is it? The class that shall not be named, I think.
How about Wednesdays with Maury, or what's there?
Yeah, right.
There we go.
Wednesdays with Robert.
That could be good, but that implies something about my health that I don't want to deal with.
Oh,
So
That's true.
Exactly.
stay safe, guys.
Take care.
You too. Thank you very